The first commercial flight in world history occurred on January 1st, 1914, in Florida, lasting only 23 minutes between two cities just 21 miles apart. Abram Field was the only passenger, paying $400, equivalent to $5,000 in today's money, for the flight. On October 5th, 1916, the first commercial airline company was established in the United Kingdom, called Aircraft Transport and Travel. It was formed by George Holt Thomas using decommissioned military planes. They offered flights across the English Channel for 21 British pounds per passenger. The flights were wildly successful, and within just a few years, more commercial airlines were opening for business in Europe and the United States. The first international flights began in February 1919 between Miami, Florida and Bimini in the Bahamas, less than 50 miles off the Florida coast. It was flown by Chalk's International Airlines and continued to fly the route until 2008 when the airline was shut down. The Dutch airline KLM was established in 1920 by aviator Albert Plesman, originally flying from London to Amsterdam. It is the oldest continually operating airline in the world. The airline was also the first Dutch airline. It now flies primarily international flights. In 1925, the Ford Motor Company created the first airplane specifically designed for carrying passengers called the Ford Trimotor. It had 12 passenger capacity and was designed for luxury and comfort. The Ford Trimotor proved that air travel could be profitable. Trimotor production ceased in 1933. Juan Trippe founded Pan American World Airways in 1927 and began regular flights around the world from Los Angeles to Shanghai to Boston. Pan Am and Northwest Airways were the only airlines flying international in the United States before World War II. With the introduction of the Boeing 247 and the Douglas DC-3, air travel stayed profitable even during the Great Depression and all the way up to the Second World War. After World War II ended, there was a rapid growth in the commercial airline industry due to the glut of planes left over from the war. There were also large manufacturing capabilities available after the war since weapons were no longer being produced. Just months after the war ended, Lockheed developed the Constellation, the first airliner to be pressurized, allowing it to fly much higher than any other aircraft, avoiding inclement weather. This marked a significant breakthrough for commercial flight. Production of the Constellation ceased in 1958. In 1947, the Boeing 377 Stratocruiser was released with an entirely different design. The Stratocruiser was able to carry up to 100 passengers, a capacity far larger than anything else on the market at the time. As capacities for passengers increased, individual prices dropped. On April 9, 1967, the Boeing 737 flew its maiden voyage, entering service for the German airline Lufthansa just 1 year later. Since then, Boeing has produced 9,129 737s, making it the most produced plane in history. The cost today is $102 million per unit. Just 3 years later, in 1970, Boeing introduced the Boeing 747, the largest aircraft produced up to that point, capable of holding 660 passengers at a time. It was mainly intended for international flight and is still in production to this day. In 1978, the United States government deregulated the aircraft industry, lowering federal barriers for airlines as an economic recession took hold. This allowed airlines to drastically lower their prices and make flying available for whole new markets. Higher rates of competition meant better prices for consumers. Since 1978, the average airplane ticket has dropped by 40% in price. The 1980s saw a massive expansion of the airline industry due to the deregulation. Many new airlines were formed immediately after this period. In the 1990s, the idea of a low-cost airline emerged, designed entirely for transportation and not for comfort. These turned out to be wildly successful and still exist today, such as Southwest and JetBlue. Today, the worldwide airline industry is worth roughly $29.6 billion, with 110,000 scheduled flights per day. Although there are occasional crashes, air travel is safer than traveling in a car. In the United States alone, 1.73 million passengers fly every day. The airline industry has come a long way in the last 100 years.